The moment Bernard heard the crash echo through the marble lobby, he knew something was terribly wrong. It wasn't the kind of sound that belonged in the towering glass headquarters of Blake Industries, a building so polished it felt like the world's heartbeat passed through its floors. Bernard ran toward the noise without thinking, his worn janitor shoes slapping against the polished tiles as if urgency itself had taken possession of his limbs. When he burst into the executive hallway, he froze, because lying on the cold floor, pale and breathless, was Aurora Blake, the billionaire owner of the company. The woman everyone saw as untouchable, unreachable, almost mythic. And in that instant, none of her wealth or power mattered. She looked fragile, fading, and the only person there capable of helping her was him. Backhand index pointing right. If you believe kindness and second chances still matter in this world, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these life-changing stories alive. Bernard dropped to his knees, fear pounding through him like a storm tearing across a quiet bay. He remembered the CPR class he had taken years ago, the one the community center had offered for free so people like him, single parents working 3 jobs, could feel a little more prepared for life. Now that old lesson was the only thread standing between this woman and the final silence. He pressed his hands on her chest and counted the compressions as best he could, praying he wasn't too late. When her breathing faltered into nothing, he didn't hesitate. He leaned down and gave her the breath she had lost, not thinking about rules, not thinking about boundaries, just giving life where life was slipping away. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't romance. It was a desperate man giving a stranger another chance to open her eyes. When her body jolted and her lungs finally caught air again, the room exhaled with her. Bernard backed away in shock, trembling, as her eyes fluttered open like dawn returning after a violent night. She didn't know what had happened. She didn't know who saved her. She only saw a janitor kneeling beside her, breathing hard, hands still trembling in blue gloves, and she saw something in him she hadn't seen in anyone for a long time, fear for her, not for her power. Real human fear. The paramedics arrived and swept her away, but not before Bernard stood and quietly returned to wiping the floors as if nothing extraordinary had happened. He did that a lot, saved pieces of the world that never noticed him. But the world noticed him now. The next morning, the office buzzed like it had swallowed electricity. People whispered his name, the janitor, the single dad, the men who saved the boss's life. Bernard hated the attention. He wasn't built for eyes. He had spent years fading into the background, so his son, Liam, could shine in the foreground. Liam was 13, bright as a lighthouse and twice as hopeful. He had no idea his father had spent the previous night awake, shaking, replaying the moment Aurora's breath had stopped. When Aurora returned to the office a week later, there was a strange quiet in her steps, as though the world had slowed down for her. She had always moved like everything in the building existed to serve her ambitions, but now she looked around with a softness that didn't belong to billionaires. She found Bernard mopping the hallway he always did at 7:15 a.m., his schedule as predictable as sunrise. She asked him what had happened, how much of her life had depended on him. And Bernard, shy and awkward, explained in the simplest way possible. He told her he did what anyone would have done, although they both knew that wasn't true. People admired Aurora. People feared her. But no one stepped toward her when she fell. Only Bernard did. Aurora insisted on thanking him properly, but Bernard refused money. Money was loud and temporary. He wanted quiet things, more hours with his son, fewer shifts, a soft bed that didn't squeak when he turned, enough breathing room to dream again. But he didn't say any of that. He just said he was glad she was alive. Something changed in her eyes at that moment. A recognition. A shift. Like she had spent her whole life surrounded by glass walls and just now discovered a doorway. Days passed, then weeks, and Aurora found reasons, small, harmless, almost silly reasons, to walk by Bernard's station. She'd pause to ask how he was. Sometimes she'd bring coffee. Sometimes she'd just stand there, letting the weight of the world slip off her shoulders for a moment. She had never known what peace felt like until she found it in the quiet presence of a man society never bothered to look at twice. Bernard didn't understand why she changed around him. He only knew he felt lighter when she appeared, like the universe had opened a window just for him and let in a breeze he didn't realize he needed. But life wasn't generous to him often, and part of him feared this was all a dream he'd wake up from. Then came the evening everything shifted again. Bernard's son Liam fell severely ill at school, and Bernard, panicked and exhausted, rushed him to the hospital. He had no insurance, no savings, nothing but prayers stacked like fragile towers inside his chest. Aurora arrived at the hospital without being called. Someone had informed her, and she came immediately, her presence cutting through the hospital lights like a lighthouse beam guiding a drowning man. She paid the bills without asking. She stood beside Bernard while doctors worked. She held Liam's hand when Bernard stepped outside to catch his breath. She didn't act like a billionaire. She acted like a human being touched by a moment that had rewritten her heart. And when Liam recovered, the first thing he asked was if the pretty lady who helped them would stay in their lives. Aurora smiled at Bernard with a quiet, almost trembling warmth. Something had changed forever. Bernard wasn't just the janitor who saved her life anymore. He was the man who taught her what a life should feel like, real, grounded, unguarded. And Aurora wasn't just the billionaire anymore. She was the woman who stepped into the world Bernard spent years surviving, offering her presence not as a queen from a tower, but as someone finally learning how to love. Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your engagement truly helps these stories reach more people.